I'm Laurie Hernandez, and this is One Creative Mind. Welcome to the next part of my conversation with international photographer and alpinist Cory Richards. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder as a young teen, and in this segment, we're going to talk about how mental health really affects our creativity and how we view the world.
I'm living my best life. I wake up with the sunrise. It does not look a thing like I thought that it would, but I've been getting my steps in.
Shifting the gears a little bit, how do you take care of your mental health and well-being today?
Today, not very well. Yesterday, I was great. It goes in waves. Therapy is one that I believe very strongly in. I meditate daily for at least an hour. I do different kinds of meditation. Some of it's strictly breath work. Some of it is, guided stuff. I take medication. I've taken medication for most of my life. More recently, I've worked with plant medicine as that industry is sort of making its debut. And I have something to say about that too. Look, so I work with a lot of different modalities. And the idea is, to your point, that this is a journey and it doesn't really end. We haven't done the work. We are doing the work constantly. And so, and the gym is a big piece of that, and I notice when, like the last 2 or 3 weeks, I haven't been going to the gym. And so that to me is like a sort of a red flag where I'm like, okay, what's happening right now? I view medication as an act of self-care. I think a lot of people are very resistant to it because they're like, I don't want to put something in. And it's like, no, you don't, this doesn't necessarily have to be forever. But in order to reach stasis where you can start to dismantle some of the beliefs or address some of the behaviors, it can be very helpful. And then for some people like me with bipolar, that might be a lifelong thing. But this is what I was going to say. I really think that healing is, therapy gives us a story, right? It helps us build a framework around what happened and why we do the certain things we do. Too often, I believe that people get hung up in that and they go, okay, now I understand. So now I healed. And that's not how it works. Therapy's great, right? Like all of a sudden we have the words and we have the language, we have the vocabulary.
I just talked about this in my session last week.
I mean, yeah.
Just pinpointed exactly because I had brought up something. My mom is a social worker. My sister is a therapist with her own private practice. Mental health and care for mental health runs in my family. So I grew up with the verbiage and the knowledge and understanding and what emotion am I feeling? What is the word for it? And I remember talking about an experience in therapy and just explaining, how I would process that and what that means for me. And she was like, okay, well, it sounds like you got it all figured out. And I was like, what? And she was like, no, it sounds like you got it all figured out. And I was like, yeah, the only problem is that it still comes up and it still hurts. And she goes, yeah. Have you wondering, have you felt, have you grieved this experience yet? Or have you just talked about it?
Right.
And I was like, you're the worst.
Yeah.
Intellectualizing and putting words to everything I was feeling, I had assumed that the feelings that were lingering because of said experience would just go away because I understood what happened. And that was simply not the case. So really glad you brought that up because what a spoiler alert that was for me. You have to feel your feelings.
Well, that's the thing so we start with this resolution where we intellectualize it and we get to this point where we understand. So resolution therapy is the work of the mind and words. Acceptance is the work, I believe, of silence and the heart. And it's actually somatic feeling where we start to understand, okay, how does this feel in my body? And yeah. I believe, now I'm not a psychologist, but I believe that true healing happens at the integration or the nexus of mind and heart when we arrive. And this is why I'm such a proponent of meditation, where we arrive, we keep training our brain to come back to the present moment where past And all of the emotions that exist there aren't drummed up. And the future doesn't exist because we're not projecting based on that. And only in that moment, when we keep going back to it and keep bringing those two things together to the space in between where nothing actually exists, do we start to actually integrate and heal and move forward. And I think the problem right now with, say, like psychedelics and stuff is people have these transcendent experiences, and they, you know, unlike therapy, all of a sudden they're like, you hear this all the time. Oh, I did ayahuasca and it was like 10 years of therapy. No, you had an experience that illuminated a trauma and helped you understand it. Without integration of that and without repeated practice, there is no resolution or moving forward from the habits that you've built based on the trauma that happened. And that's where meditation becomes so integral.
Yeah, I saw there was this visual, and cut me off if this doesn't make any sense, because every time I try to explain this to my family and my partner, my loved ones, I always get the kind of question mark, and I get there at some point. But I saw this visual of it was almost like the passage of time, and where we are is in the middle, and it was actually on TikTok, and this psychologist or therapist was expressing how more often than not we as humans perceive us as we are moving forwards through time, kind of like on a treadmill. And he was like, I would like to challenge the perspective that life is moving towards us and we are always here in the present. We are not moving anywhere. We are here and life comes towards us. And I love that concept, because it's almost like putting glue on my feet and telling me I have to stay here while, you know, and as someone who has lots of anxiety, who wants to jump to the future, my core instinct is to prep and to plan and to try to comprehend every situation that could go wrong. And the concept that will come to me when it's ready is so soothing and comforting. And so I'm curious on your thoughts about that.
Well, no, it's innate. And so there's a couple things I want to say to that. We are always in the present moment, and yet our bodies and our brains are so they're so connected that we're also magnificent at time traveling. And so when we have trauma, or when we have a lot to do, whatever it happens to be, what we do, we have whatever, 60, 70,000 thoughts a day, 90% of those are recycled. And so when we revisit the same thoughts over and over and over again, we experience the same emotions by digging up a terrible experience with our ex or all the bills we have to pay. We're actually living, our brain is creating the chemicals that make us perceive that scenario, whatever it happens to be, as real. So we are functionally traveling back in time to our history, or moving in time forward to something that hasn't happened. Yeah. And in doing so, we deprive ourselves of what you've just talked about, of the beauty of life happening towards us and around us. And we don't make space to actually interpret and feel it. And like you said earlier, so many people, obviously, I love talking about this stuff. So many people are waiting for this aha moment in healing. They're waiting for the profound, which is where we go back to psychedelics. And, I had this profound experience where I felt connected to everything. And we want this jumping off point where all of a sudden everything is resolved. And I would sort of dovetail off what that person said and say, the profound moment, you might have an awakening, maybe. But I think that's more, again, that's story that's created after the fact. It's how it's words we use to describe something. But the profound moment is, and I really believe this, the profound moment is waking up every morning. You have a profound moment where life changes and you're in a new existence every single day. I mean, the probability of our existence is so close to zero that the actual profundity of it, like the moment that we should all, well, I don't want to say should, but the profound moment in every day is the fact that we are alive and have the opportunity to begin to look at ourselves and look at our lives in new ways. And that's offered every second of every day.
Yeah. And it's also like, ever since I started antidepressants, I had been having the thought constantly of like, wow, what a beautiful thing it is to be alive, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I used to never have that thought, but I just love that you brought that up. There's even if it's not hopeful for the future, the curiosity is enough. We're here. There's so much to explore. There's so much to keep an eye out for. There's so much to learn. There's so many people to meet. There's so many things to connect with. Waking up is a gift.
It is
pretty cool. And it's so hard to see that when you're going through so much, but it really is.
I mean, it's the most special thing that we're offered every day. And I think it's, especially those of what, people who deal with mental health struggles oftentimes feel more deeply, like we interpret the world on a very, and that's not to say it's better or worse. It's just it's like, I try to say, it's like my nerves. I was born with nerves on the outside of my skin, like the way it just feels more. And that can be very overbearing. That can be extremely disorienting. It can be very scary. And it's also my greatest gift. Right. And so when we deal with mental health stuff, it's easy to be like, I don't even want to live today, but on the flip side of that is the ability to feel and express in ways that is truly illuminating for the rest of the world and is, again, our deepest gift.
Yeah. I'd say within the last year, that was like, I hadn't, like, I've done it before, but with the last year or so, I have happy cried so much, which was such an uncommon experience for me. And it was this feeling like I'm kind of within family, friends, whatever. Lots of big feelings. They're everywhere. Exactly how you've described it, like just nerves on my skin and on my brain and in my thoughts. Like it's everywhere. They are prickly, but receiving, like it is so sensitive. And it's neither bad nor good. It just is. But to happy cry was such a conflicting thing because I had only cried when I was really upset or sad or depressed or something happened. And to feel so much joy that my body was like, wow, we've circled completely back around into crying over this. It was just, it's pretty great, but it's such a big feeling. It is such a big feeling. And it's really comforting to also hear you say that, because sometimes it can feel isolating to think, wow, I feel so much. I receive so much from my peers and from the outside stimuli that I just get so overwhelmed. I want to hide in a little shell unless I'm able to put that energy back. And it's like part of the process is just learning how to do that and learning what works for you. So I'm really glad that you've mentioned that.
It's living with depression, living with bipolar. I've often described it this way. I feel like when I'm in a spell, and I still go through them, I feel like I'm treading water with ankle weights and wrist weights. And I'm wearing a crown of weights. And meanwhile, people are just walking next to me and I'm trying to swim, I'm trying to like keep my head above water with all this added sort of, and you're trying to describe this to people and they're like, dude, what is wrong? Why can't you?
That's the worst feeling. That is the worst feeling when you're like, how are you not freaking out right now?
Yeah.
How, like, where are your ankle weights? Where did you put them? How did you got them off? How did you get them off? Share your secrets.
And then you have an experience, like you say, with antidepressants or whatever it happens to be. Maybe you have a breakthrough in therapy. Maybe you do have a transcendent moment, whether it's in meditation or psychedelics. And all of a sudden you feel like you're walking on the beach and you're like, this is what the rest of life, this is what other people feel like. Like this is unfathomable to me. And for me, I've often been distrustful of it because with bipolar, so often a good feeling can be indicative of a hypomanic or a manic episode. So you're like, I don't trust feeling good. And so you start to gaslight yourself into believing that your positive experiences are not only potentially false, but dangerous. And I think as people who struggle with depression or bipolar, we need to learn how to trust that joy is not dangerous, and we shouldn't block ourselves from it. In fact, we should find every way we can to experience it, because that ultimately rewires our brain and lifts us up out of those deeply ingrained neural pathways that keep us locked in sort of this bondage of pain.
Yeah, the poet Mary Oliver has a quote that joy was not meant to be a crumb, and I think about that one a lot. I think it's quite a fun one to look at.
I love that.
I'm going to go ahead and make a little turn here. I'm curious to know how your sensitivity and big feelings and kind of that feeling that there are nerves everywhere, how does this affect your creativity and the things that you do and the things you love?
I mean, I think it is the guiding light, honestly. The sensitivity is the guiding light to my creativity. I think even in my darkest times, I was still making decent photographs. And part of that is that I always thought that bringing my vulnerability to any situation is what ultimately allowed a deeper sense of connection between me and what I was photographing. And one of the criticisms, it's not a criticism, one of the critiques I get a lot about my work is it's very raw. My writing is very raw. My photographs are very raw. My films are very raw. And I think that comes from me essentially feeling very raw in the world. And I believe that when we come to any sort of creative endeavor, it's not only important, but essential that we bring ourselves to it. The idea of objectivity, even in journalism, I think is, quite frankly, it's a noble fiction. It's essential that we bring our emotions there, because empathy helps us create stories that are deeper and more meaningful. So, to me, it's that double-edged sword of, okay, you know, I've got all these nerve endings that are sticking out into the world and aren't covered by my skin, and it really hurts sometimes. And yet it's helping me interpret and see in different ways that I, with so much gratitude, have the tools to transform into an experience for other people, whether that be through a photograph that they look at, something they read, or a film that they watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also just, it brings this realness to it. It is grounded. And I think it really connects with lots of people because of how vulnerable and how real it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, what do you most want people to know about living a full life with or despite a mental health condition?
Well, first of all, I am a strong proponent, and I am a strong believer that these diagnoses are not, back to story. It's very important that we examine the story that we tell ourselves, because I do believe that with consistency and diligence, self-reflection and attention and honesty, we can actually rewire our brains. Our brains can heal. I do believe that we can functionally unravel the trauma that has triggered the genetic processes that have put us under these diagnostic umbrellas. I'm not saying, when I say that everybody should go off their meds and it's all going to be okay, right? Like, I'm not saying that, because that's not how it works. What happens with over time, and I go back to meditation, when you sit down and you do this work and you show up for yourself every day, you start to restructure the brain. So over time, with patience, I believe that we can actually heal ourselves. Now, I also believe that there's profound wisdom in caring for the present moment. So if you are in crisis and if you're feeling depressed or whatever it happens to be, we need to take care of those situations acutely. And that requires medication, it requires therapy, it requires all sorts of modalities that help us move through that. I guess, you know, did I go off topic here? Like,
oh, no, no.
I'm just trying to think of how to answer that question.
I think you did answer it. It was
okay.
Like, what do you most want people to know living a full life with a mental health condition? And it's, you are living, you are doing it.
Yeah, so I think it's a process, and I also don't think that these diagnoses need to be prohibitive
Yeah.
of our dreams and our goals and our desires. We can live full, beautiful, rich, incredibly important and impactful lives because of our mental health struggles alongside them. And just because we heal them potentially doesn't mean that all that creativity or that deep feeling goes away. So we shouldn't be scared that there's this sort of myth that all great art comes out of pain. I think that's true. And it doesn't mean that you can't create great art or live a huge, beautiful life when you're no longer in pain. You still get to keep all of that. And in fact, a lot of research shows that once we free ourselves from the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight that we constantly live in, that's when our creativity can actually bloom and blossom.
I love that so much. I think that's the perfect note to end on. I mean, Cory, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your journey, your thoughts, your feelings, your vulnerability. It is so important that we hear about it. And viewers, thank you too. You can see more of Cory's amazing work at coryrichards.com. And now for a quick look at one of the many mental health apps on the market. I spoke earlier with our team at One Mind Cyber Guide. Joining me now is Dr. Stephen Schuler, the Executive Director of One Mind Cyber Guide. Stephen, thank you so much for being here to chat about Woebot. I love the name, by the way.
It's a very cute little robot too.
I already feel like this instinct to take care of it, you know? First off, what is CBT?
So CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a science-backed solution that helps treat a variety of mental health issues. It's been found to be useful for depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, psychosis. Cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the most researched and most science-backed solution we have for mental health concerns.
Oh. Now, what is a chatbot and how is CBT delivered that way?
So a chatbot is a software program that you can connect with or type to in free text and respond back to you. So it's like your text messaging or messaging a friend of yours, but what Woebot does is it comes back to you with different content or advice based on cognitive behavioral therapy. So it teaches you different skills to examine your own thought processes and look at them more realistically to help you get what you want out of life.
Pretty cool. I like the sound of that.
It's really useful.
I really do believe so. Who might this type of therapy be helpful for and how?
So as I mentioned, cognitive behavioral therapy has been found effective for a variety of mental health conditions. But I'll also note that the skills of cognitive behavioral therapy can be helpful for anyone. All of us could use some benefit in getting more separation from the negative thinking patterns that get us down sometimes, or learning some more skills to be more effective in pursuing our goals and what we want out of life. And so, you know, Woebot is not just for individuals who are experiencing mental health challenges, but can also teach us skills that can help us get more out of life.
How long does someone need to use this app and how often?
So typically in cognitive behavioral therapy, we actually see some pretty meaningful benefits very early on in engaging in these types of programs. So I would say you'd likely see some sort of change start, 2 to 4 weeks after using the app. Really, I think that the people who benefit the most from these apps use them a couple different times a week. So maybe think about trying to check in, if not on a daily basis, maybe 3 to 5 times per week, because it really is trying to teach you some skills that you want to then go apply to your life. So you don't want to just download it and then leave it on your phone. You want to make sure you check in on that little robot on a regular basis.
Is there anything else that users should know about Woebot?
So I'd say it's important to remember, although Woebot is shown to be an effective intervention and useful at teaching the skills of cognitive behavioral therapy, it's not a replacement for therapy. And so it can be a useful on-ramp to teach the skills or reinforce the skills. But if you find that you're not getting the most out of it, I do think connecting with a trained mental health professional is a good next step.
And finally, how about the cost?
So Woebot is actually available for free. And so you can go download Woebot from the app stores and really try it out and start learning some of these practices of cognitive behavioral therapy yourself.
The CyberGuide website is a great online resource to find out all about the many mental health apps that are on the market. How do you rate each app and what is the criteria?
So we rate apps by having members of our review team use the app and look for different aspects of the quality of application. We look at aspects of credibility. Is there evidence to support that this app works? We look at user experience. Is it easy to learn and easy to use? And we look at transparency around data security and privacy practices. Do they tell you what they do with your data if you enter into the app? And Wobot scores quite well on these scores at OneMind CyberGuide. So it's one of our highest scoring apps, in fact. It gets 5 out of 5 on our credibility score, a 4.64 out of 5 on user experience, and acceptable on transparency around data security and privacy practices.
Incredible. Stephen, thank you so much. And viewers, thank you too. For more details and information, visit onemindcyberguide.org. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
I'm living my best